Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is NopNapNarp, and today I sacrificed for y'all because in order to make this video, I had to play a horror game, and boy, am I not someone who embraces fear. And it wasn't just any horror game. Oh no. It was the granddaddy of them all. It was Amnesia, The Dark Descent. Oh god, no, scary water monster, no, thank you. Seriously, the things I do for you guys is incredible. I'm only kidding, guys. You know I appreciate all of you, and with that, welcome to Psychology of Gaming, the series where we attempt to explain how game developers use psychological principles when making games, and in turn, how games can influence us psychologically. For today's episode, I wanted to expand on a principle that I talked about in this video right here, Psychology of Gaming Episode 6, all about Fortnite. Psst, Fortnite's really cool, and I like it a lot, and so do many other people. So when you're done watching this video, go watch that video. Thanks. Anyway, that video is all about explaining how a third-person battle royale shooter is able to make some people feel very afraid or anxious while playing it. I explain the reasons for why that is, and one of those reasons happens to be the subject of today's video, that being the fear of the unknown that humans experience. So without further ado, let's get spooky and jump straight in to today's video. Amnesia, The Dark Descent. This game is freaking scary, man. Ask anyone who has played it. I mean, you don't even have to be sitting in the dark to feel the fear. I played most of this game with lights on in middle of the day and still had my heart pounding during the experience. And the craziest thing about the horror and the fear that this game invokes in you is that a lot of it is done without you ever even realizing or understanding what the major threats in the game actually are. Sure, you know that they're monsters, but the game is designed in a way that it is advantageous for the player to avoid the creatures or even avoid looking at the creatures. And this results in players being afraid of something they don't even know very well. And it's not just the creatures that give the scares, it's the fact that you're trapped in this creepy castle with no recollection of what's going on, and all of these scary sounds are happening all over the place and you have no idea what's making them. It is atmospheric horror at its finest. You see, Frictional Games has found a way to make you afraid without even knowing what it is you're supposed to be afraid of. They have designed a game that capitalizes on the root of most phobias and anxieties. They have successfully taken advantage of our fear of the unknown and blended it into every design decision in the game. So I figured the best way to show how Frictional Games managed to pull off this ultimate horror immersion is to walk you through what I'd call the game's first act. That being from the time Daniel wakes up to the point in which you escape the clutches of the water lurker. Before we do that though, we first have to understand a bit more about why humans naturally fear the unknown, and for that, we turn to the psychological perspective. We have fears of death, spiders, height, water, choking, public speaking, snakes, monsters, and even stranger things like trypophobia, the fear of holes, and venustrophobia, the fear of beautiful women. Now, obviously not everyone experiences each of these phobias, and that's only a short list, but I'm sure you deal with at least one type of phobia, and honestly, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below, so get typing. Anyway, recent studies have shown that many of these phobias can be traced back to one central fear that we humans experience, that being the fear of the unknown and the uncontrolled. Speaking from a biological standpoint, our brains are designed to keep us alive and keep us safe, and two of the ways it can continue to succeed in those goals are through pattern recognition and maintaining a sense of control. Let's start by looking at the first, pattern recognition. Patterns are predictable because they follow a set of rules, and so it makes it easy for us to understand what will happen next. A simple example would be traffic light patterns. We know that green means go, yellow means prepare to stop, and red means stop. So if we are approaching a stoplight that's green, but there's still a good distance before we reach it, we may not make that green light. The light turns yellow and we start to slow down because we know that in about 5 to 10 seconds, that light will turn red and we won't be able to go on. It's a simple pattern that our brains have experienced hundreds of thousands of times, and so we're trained on what to expect. In fact, you probably don't even consciously think about what you need to do when you're in that situation. Your brain is just kind of on autopilot and tells your foot to hit the brake and start to slow down. But if those patterns and expectations break, it can lead to people being confused, angry, or afraid. Imagine for a second you're in that same situation. You approach the light, it turns yellow, you start to slow down, and then out of nowhere, the light goes back to being green instead of red. You'd probably be pretty confused, and your brain and body might experience a mild adrenaline rush as it tries to make sense of what has just happened. The situation we thought we had a good understanding of has now become an unknown situation, and it triggers a response in us. In this case, confusion and maybe slight panic. However, when an unknown situation is accompanied by scary monsters and spooky sounds, we don't feel confusion, we feel fear. Just like in Amnesia, the Dark Descent. This fear is boosted by the second factor I mentioned a while ago, a lack of control. In Amnesia, you are at the mercy of the game, and are really just along for the ride. This inability to control your surroundings is magnified on your first playthrough of the game because you don't know what to expect next, you don't know what's making all those creepy noises, and you don't know how to manipulate the game in your favor. You are exposed to total fear immersion through a lack of knowledge about your surroundings. So quickly, let's recap. Our brains like to keep us alive and safe. In order to do that, it uses pattern recognition and social norms. When these patterns are broken, it can trigger a sense of anxiousness in us, and this anxiousness can be channeled into many different phobias and panic disorders. It all comes back to the fact that we feel that we don't have control anymore, and we have no idea what will happen next. Our brains begin to panic and hypothesize all the things that could potentially happen. Most of them are completely ridiculous, but all we know for sure is that our safety is in danger and we want more information to better understand our surroundings in order to compose ourselves once again. The brilliance of Amnesia: The Dark Descent is that it takes you on this roller coaster of emotions from anxious to terrified to calm in cycles throughout the game. And it is able to do that without throwing much in your face to be scared of. It doesn't have to rely on creatures right up in your face or massive amounts of gore in order to get you feeling on edge. The game does it all through sound, music, atmosphere, and the use of limited visuals. Every component of this game is designed to get you afraid without ever really letting you know what you're supposed to be afraid of. So like I mentioned, let's walk through the opening of this game to give you a sense of how Frictional has succeeded in capitalizing on our fear of the unknown and the uncontrolled. The game opens with our character, Daniel, awakening in a mysterious castle with no recollection of why he's there. Throughout the game, Daniel is kept almost entirely silent so that the player can more easily immerse themselves into his character. It allows the horror to skip the middleman. Instead of having to be afraid of what Daniel is experiencing, you are just afraid of what you are experiencing. As you get up and start walking around the opening hallways of the castle, you get a sense of what Amnesia is gonna be about. Daniel is disoriented and sways back and forth as he walks, while his vision is a bit blurry. Soon, the whips of the wind outside are accompanied by footsteps that the player immediately knows aren't their own. You hear the footsteps, but you can't immediately tell what is causing them. All you know is that whoever is causing them could be around the next corner of this winding hallway. The game then warns you about standing in dark areas, as the darkness makes Daniel go more insane because of the fear he feels. It's kind of turning that feeling you get when you hear a bump in the dark night into a game mechanic. Fear is amplified in the dark because your brain is unable to collect more information about what caused the sound because, of course, you're in the dark, your visuals are very limited. Eventually, Daniel has a bit of a nervous breakdown and collapses to the floor, hearing weird noises and moans before continuing on. Then, a door randomly opens on its own, and players approach with caution because, again, who knows what the hell made that door open, because it certainly didn't do it on its own. At this point, myself, and I imagine many other players, had already experienced enough to feel a bit on edge and immersed into the actual experience of the game. And all we've really done is walk down a hallway and heard some weird noises and footsteps. As Daniel enters the old archives, he witnesses another door fly open with a gust of wind that blows out all the candles in the room. The game reminds the player that witnessing odd or creepy things will increase Daniel's insanity meter and bring him closer to the fail state of the game. You're encouraged to look away from the bad things, which leads you to bringing in less information about the creatures or events, and therefore allowing your brain to run wild with possibilities. After hearing a bit about the story, you come to the main hall, where Daniel realizes that in order to move on, he will have to find a way to dissolve a fleshy, unknown substance that blocks his path. The main entrance hall is fairly well lit, and this leads to the player feeling some sort of safety, as this seems to be a safe area with no major threats, although the creepy music and the wind whipping around certainly may convince you otherwise. Regardless, this is an example of how the game has built up a bit of fear in you during the opening minutes, but is now giving you a chance to sit back, relax, and calm down a bit, because if the game was full on scares all the time, it would most likely be less enjoyable as a scare tactic, because your brain would be able to predict what would be happening next way more easily. In order to dissolve the fleshy mess, it's clear that you're going to need some sort of chemical. And this becomes the game's first puzzle, finding the ingredients and mixing them together. The game gives you the option to explore in a few different directions, and the player gets the sense that the scares will resume once they leave this main entrance hall. To get the chemicals he needs, Daniel must go into the wine cellar, but unfortunately for him, and you the player, the door is locked and requires a key, which sends Daniel into the upper archives of the castle. After solving another puzzle and hearing some more flashbacks, Daniel gets access to the key. Keep in mind, all the while, the player is having to manage their resources while moving through the narrow rooms with limited lighting, all the while they're still hearing these creepy sounds. The atmospheric horror doesn't really ever go away, it just intensifies in certain areas. Upon finding the key, you still haven't encountered any visual threats of something that can hurt you. Yet. That is, until you come back from a flashback and re-enter a big room where in the distance, you hear an unsettling groan and see a figure walking into a doorway. It's the first visual confirmation that you aren't alone and that you are in serious danger. Most players, myself included, go towards the hallway but give it a wide berth to make sure that the creature isn't ready to pounce on them. In reality, you're safe, the monster can't get you here, but the game doesn't really let you know that for sure. It's keeping the control out of your hands. With the key to the wine cellar in hand, you head there to get what you need. After collecting some items, you encounter what may just be my favorite moment of the whole game. You collect a healing item, and as you turn around, you see it. The figure from before, that monster, standing in the distance, covered in shadow. You know it's there, it's looking towards you. Does it know you're there? What should I do? I'm concerned. All of these thoughts go through the mind as you have no idea what this creature is and what it might do to you. The game instructs you to look away so that your sanity can remain intact. Again, this is complete evidence that the developers are capitalizing on a fear of the unknown. The less time you spend looking at the creatures, the less you truly know about them, and therefore the more scary it can become as the mind runs wild and dreams up all sorts of scenarios that the monster may enact on you. And when you turn to look if the monster is coming, it's vanished. Gone completely. Super terrifying. You collect the chemicals and return to make the concoction needed to advance. However, an unexplained explosion in the lab provides perhaps the first real loud jump scare of the game, which can certainly heighten your adrenaline rush. You make the acid you need and return to the entrance hall for a bit of safety. But it's short-lived. You dissolve the fleshy mess and move on further into the depths of the castle. You arrive in an area where now the monster can actually hurt you and harm you as it roams around freely in this area. The game has spent the first hour building this creature up, and now it's turning the dial to 11 by letting it freely come after you. You've been trained to avoid it at all costs, and will most likely do so, meaning your knowledge and understanding of the creature will still be very limited. Eventually, you escape into a cellar, to a flooded basement, and perhaps what most people will call the most memorable part of the game, your interactions with the water monster. As you enter the flooded basement, you hear a terrifying roar as an invisible creature starts to move towards you quite quickly. The music picks up, and you realize being in the water is not so good for your safety, so you hop onto a box for protection. It's at this moment an important distinction is made in your mind. Being in the water is dangerous, but being out of it is safe. If you're like me, you'll probably take a few minutes to try to understand what the creature is, but ultimately it is invisible, which is a brilliant decision to make. Perhaps the best design choice in this game full of excellent design choices. Here's why. Amnesia is a game about taking advantage of your fear of the unknown. And in a section like this, where standing on a box means safety, it would completely undermine the fear if the creature was visible. You'd be able to take your time to look at it and get a complete understanding of it to the point that you'd be numb to the horror that the creature presents. But instead, by making it invisible, your mind is allowed to wander off and can only imagine what horrors the creature could do to you if you're caught. And with the realization that you won't know what this thing is, only that it wants you dead, you begin to hop from box to box frantically and sprint through the water, all the while the creature is in hot pursuit. After escaping the first water lurker, you come to a second, where you must use bits of flesh to distract the creature. As it gnaws away on human arms, flesh, and bone, you quietly sneak through the water, and ultimately just barely escape the clutches of the creature. Finally, you enter a room where the creature is straight up chasing you, and you must full out sprint through the water to escape. The safety of the floating boxes is gone, and you're left to haul ass in the best chase I've ever experienced in a video game. Each of these water lurker sections ramped up the fear and finally culminated in a dramatic escape back to a safe area where again, you're free to stand still and calm down a bit. And the best part of all, everything you were afraid of was built by your own mind, as the only visual you get of the water monster is a splash in the water accompanied by the chasing sounds of a horrifying and hungry creature. Simply incredible. The game goes on to present many moments like this while never letting up on the atmospheric horror. And so to end this video, I'd figured I'd let the creative director of Amnesia, Thomas Grip, explain just how the horror in this game is meant to work. I mean, who better to explain how the game capitalizes on our fear of the unknown better than the designer of the game? Certainly not me, so take it away, Thomas.
So Amnesia: The Dark Descent is a horror survival type of game.
Yeah.
Can you kind of talk about how you use the art direction and gameplay to give that horror feeling?
Oh, a huge topic here. I think, okay, I'm just going to be quick here. First of all, the thing is that we try and keep everything in the player's mind. Show as little as possible, and also let the player do as little as possible. Because if you're like shooting stuff all the time, that's your main activity. You're not gonna focus on some weird sound. So if your entire focus is just focusing on weird sounds, you get a different kind of experience. You're really like minimizing the impressions that the player has. Sensory deprivation almost, with just the small sounds and ambience. So that's a good thing. And then instead what you can focus on is living into the game. So your entire focus is not beating the game, but immersing yourself in the game. So you're putting that as a main focus for the whole gameplay things. So that's a big thing, just a design focus. And then art direction and so on. It's less is more. Don't show the monsters up close, drooling and stuff like that. Save that for as late as possible, if possible, never. So I think that's the main points, really.
So that about sums it up, ladies and gentlemen. The team at Frictional Games understood that we have a deep-rooted fear to the unknown, and used that to design a game that would spook the living daylights out of us. I hope this video has helped you better understand why Amnesia: The Dark Descent is often considered the greatest horror game of all time, even though it doesn't throw the scares right in your face. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please check out some of my other episodes of Psychology of Gaming. They're all pretty great, I'd say, and my mom says so too, so you know they have to be good then. If you want more information on Fear of the Unknown, I've left some links in the description below for you to check out, as well as the full video of Design 3's interview with Thomas Grip. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Consider subscribing for more. And as always, have a nice day, and take care.